April 1905. Bohemia, Austrian Empire. Chief Engineer Karel Novák oversees a coal mining operation in the hills south of Prague, where his crew has just completed drainage works to eliminate flooding in the lower galleries. They diverted an ancient pond that local villagers called sacred, redirected streams that had flowed for centuries, made the mine dry and profitable. But when workers begin dying, found with water in their lungs despite being discovered in bone-dry tunnels, their bodies soaked and cold in places where no moisture exists, Novák learns that some waters cannot be moved without consequence. This is his account of the Vodník, the water spirit of Czech folklore, and what happens when you steal from something that has claimed every drowning in these valleys for 1,000 years. Subscribe now for more suppressed historical accounts. I am submitting this report under protest, knowing it will be dismissed as the ravings of a man broken by tragedy and stress. But I am a graduate of the Imperial Technical University in Prague, a licensed mining engineer with 12 years of experience, and I have documented everything with the precision my profession demands. What follows is the truth about the Karlstein mine disaster, the real reason we sealed the lower galleries permanently, and why the Habsburg Mining Commission should never approve drainage operations in this district again. My name is Karel Novák. I am 41 years old, born in Mladá Boleslav, to a family of mine workers who sent me to university, hoping I would rise above the coal dust that had killed my father and grandfather. I studied engineering, geology, mine safety, everything needed to extract resources efficiently and safely from beneath the earth. I learned nothing about the Vodník, nothing about the price of disturbing water that has been claimed for centuries, nothing about the difference between water that can be moved and water that belongs to something older than the empire I served. April 15th, 1905. The Karlstein mine had operated since 1887, producing quality coal from seams that ran beneath the hills overlooking the Barunka River. The operation was profitable, but plagued by water. Underground streams, seepage from the pond on the hill above, constant flooding in the lower galleries that required pumping equipment and reduced productivity. In March, the company approved my proposal to solve the problem permanently. We would drain Černá Tun, the Black Pond, a small body of water that sat directly above the mine workings. The pond fed underground streams that caused our flooding. Eliminate the source, eliminate the problem. The local villagers objected. They always did when mining operations expanded, but their reasons were particularly superstitious this time. Černá Tun belongs to the Vodník, an old woman named Babička Marta told me when we held the village meeting. For as long as our great-grandfathers remember, that pond has been his. He lives in the depths, collects the souls of those who drown. You cannot take his water without payment. The Vodník is folklore, I explained patiently. A story to keep children from drowning. The pond is water, nothing more. And the company has legal right to drainage operations on their own land. Legal right means nothing to the Vodník, she replied. He does not recognize Austrian law. He was here before the empire, before the Czechs, before anyone built mines in these hills. The water is his, and he will take back what you steal. I thanked her for her concerns and proceeded with the drainage. The work took 3 weeks. We dug drainage channels to redirect the pond's outflow, built pumps to lower the water level, and by April 15th, Černá Tun was reduced to a muddy depression with perhaps 2 feet of water in the deepest point. The mine immediately benefited. Water flow in the lower galleries dropped by 70%. The pumps ran less frequently. Productivity increased. The company directors were delighted. That night, the first man drowned. April 16th, 1905. Gigi Kovács was found at dawn in Gallery 4, Level 3, one of the deepest workings, 80 meters underground. He'd been on the night shift, checking timber supports, routine maintenance work. We found him lying on his back in the center of the gallery. The tunnel was perfectly dry. We'd just pumped it the day before. The floor was dust and coal fragments, not even damp, but Gigi Kovács was soaked. Water dripped from his clothes, pooled around his body, matted his hair to his skull. And when Dr. Tomáš Bartoš, our camp physician, examined him, he found water in the lungs. He drowned, Bartoš said, his voice uncertain. Lungs full of fluid, petechial hemorrhaging consistent with asphyxiation by drowning. But Karel, there's no water down here. Where did he drown? I had no answer. We searched the gallery thoroughly. No pools, no puddles, no water source of any kind. The walls were dry, the ceiling dry, the floor dry except for the water that had come from Gigi's body. Perhaps he drowned elsewhere, I suggested, in the wash-house or a water barrel, and was moved here. But the night shift foreman swore Gigi never left Gallery 4. He'd been checking timbers, working alone, and when he didn't report at shift change, they'd found him exactly where he lay. There's something else, Bartoš said quietly, showing me Gigi's hands. Look at his fingers. The skin was waterlogged, wrinkled as if he'd been submerged for hours, and under his fingernails was green sediment, algae or pond scum, something organic that grows in still water, the kind of sediment that would come from Černá Tun. April 18th, 1905, I ordered increased patrols in the lower galleries, better lighting, paired workers so no one worked alone. I also sent samples of the sediment to the university for analysis, hoping for a rational explanation. On April 18th, 2 more men died. Both were found in different locations, one in Gallery 6, one in the equipment storage tunnel, both in completely dry areas, both soaked through, water pooling around them, both with lungs full of water and that green sediment under their fingernails. Dr. Bartoš performed autopsies in our makeshift morgue. This is impossible, he kept saying. Medically, physiologically impossible. They drowned, but there's no water source. They drowned while walking through dry tunnels. It's as if what? As if water appeared around them, filled their lungs while they were standing, working, breathing air, as if they drowned in nothing. The workers were terrified. In half the day, shift refused to descend. The night shift foreman came to me and said flatly, "The men won't work underground, not until we know what's happening." I held a meeting in the surface compound. 80 men gathered, their faces hard with fear and anger. 3 men are dead, I acknowledged. We don't yet understand how, but we're investigating. In the meantime, we're shutting down the lower galleries until— "It's the Vodník," someone shouted. "You drained his pond. Now he's taking payment." Murmurs of agreement. I saw men making signs against evil, heard whispered prayers to St. John of Nepomuk, the patron saint of those who drown. There is no Vodník, I said firmly. There's a rational explanation. Gas pockets that create hallucinations, perhaps, or a water source we haven't discovered. But superstition won't save us. Safety protocols and engineering will. But even as I spoke, I felt doubt creeping in. 3 men found soaked in dry tunnels, 3 men drowned where no water existed, 3 men with pond sediment under their nails from a pond we'd drained. April 22nd, 1905. The miners refused to work underground. I couldn't blame them. The company directors demanded I resume operations, but I couldn't send men into galleries where something, some phenomenon, was drowning them in the absence of water. I returned to Chernatun, hoping to find answers. The drained pond was a depression of mud now, scattered with dead fish and weeds exposed to air. At the deepest point, perhaps a meter of water remained, dark and still. Babichka Marta was there, standing at the edge, looking down at the diminished water. "You see what you've done," she said without turning. "You've taken his home, his territory, the water where he lived for centuries. So now he brings his water to you, takes his drownings from your men instead of from the careless swimmers who would have come in summer. If the Vodník exists, which I don't concede, why would he kill miners? They didn't drain the pond, because you did it for the mine, for your company, your profits, your empire that doesn't belong here. The Vodník doesn't distinguish between engineer and miner. You're all the same to him, invaders who took his water." She looked at me then, and I saw no anger in her face, just sadness and certainty. "He will keep taking until the balance is restored. 7 men, I think. 7 for the 7 streams that fed Chernatun. 7 for the 7 decades he held this valley before your mine came. No, the number matters to him. How do you know this? Because my grandmother saw it happen in 1823 when they tried to drain the pond for farmland. 7 men drowned in the village over one summer, in their beds, in their barns, in places where water had no business being. They stopped the drainage, let the pond refill, and the drownings stopped." "Old stories," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Test it then. Let the pond refill. See if the drownings stop, or proceed with your rational explanations and count the bodies." I walked away, but her words followed me. April 25th, 1905. I ordered the drainage channels blocked, the pumps reversed. We would let Chernatun refill, not because I believed in water spirits, but because correlation suggested causation, and empirically, draining the pond preceded the deaths. It was a rational decision based on observable data. That's what I told myself. But that night, before the refilling could begin, 2 more men died. Both were sleeping in the surface barracks when it happened. Their bunkmates heard nothing, no struggle, no sounds of distress. They simply woke to find František Dvořák and Martin Sug lying in their beds, soaked through, water pooling on the floor beneath them, drowned in their sleep, in a heated, dry barracks with no water source within 50 meters. Dr. Bartosz's examination found the same signs: lungs filled with water, that green pond sediment, skin wrinkled from prolonged immersion. But these men had never left their beds, had never been near water, had drowned while sleeping in air. 5 men, Bartosz said quietly. 5 dead. If the old woman is right about 7. I didn't let him finish. Instead, I organized an emergency crew to begin refilling Chernatun immediately, working through the night to restore water to the drained depression. But we were too slow. April 27th, 1905. The 6th death occurred while we were still pumping water back into the pond. A young engineer named Petr Novotný, my own assistant, a promising student from Prague, was working in my office when it happened. I was outside, supervising the pumping operation. When I returned an hour later, I found him, Peter was slumped over my desk, water dripping from his hair, his clothes saturated, a puddle spreading across the floor and soaking my technical drawings. His eyes were open, staring at something I couldn't see. The office was bone dry except for the water that had come from his body. The windows were closed, no rain, no leak, no plausible source. He had drowned at my desk in my office while working on drainage calculations for Chernatun. I stood there holding his cold, wet hand and felt certainty crystallize in my chest. Not rational certainty, not engineering certainty, but the older kind of knowing that comes when reality breaks your models and forces you to accept what your eyes show you. The Vodník was real. The water spirit existed, and we had stolen his home. April 28th, 1905. Night I went to Chernatun after Peter's body was removed. The pond was refilling slowly. We'd restored perhaps 3 feet of water, but it would take days to bring it back to original levels. I stood at the water's edge in darkness, and I spoke to something I couldn't see. "I'm sorry," I said to the black water. "I didn't believe. I thought the pond was just water, just resources to be managed. I didn't understand it belonged to you." The water remained still. No wind, no ripples, just perfect black surface reflecting stars. 6 men are dead. The old woman says you'll take 7. Please, take me. I ordered the drainage. I'm responsible. Take me and spare the others. For a long moment, nothing. Then the water moved. Not a ripple, not a wave. The entire surface shifted, as if something vast had turned over in the depths. And from that darkness, a shape rose. It broke the surface slowly, a head, shoulders, torso, human-shaped but wrong in every detail. The skin was pale green, translucent in places, covered with algae and pond weeds. The hair was long and black and dripping, tangled with water plants. The face was elongated, the eyes too large and too dark, or reflecting moonlight with a cold intelligence that made my breath catch. It was beautiful. It was terrible. It was ancient beyond my ability to comprehend. The Vodník stood in water that should have been too shallow to conceal it, regarding me with those dark eyes. When it spoke, the voice was like water, flowing over stones, wet and cold and patient. "You drained my home, scattered my collections, disturbed water that I have claimed for centuries." The Czech words were archaic, formal, but perfectly comprehensible. 6 have paid. 1 remains. "Take me," I said again. "I'm responsible." The Vodník tilted its head, considering. "You are responsible. But the 7th death must come from the depths, from the place where you stole my water. The balance requires it. Then I'll go down into the mine. I'll wait in the lowest gallery." No, the word carried weight like deep water. The 7th will come to me willingly, understanding why, or the deaths will continue until someone does. It began to sink back into the water. I called out desperately, "How do I make this right? How do I restore the balance?" The Vodník paused, half submerged. "Return my water completely. Abandon the drainage. Seal the mine's lower galleries. They breach my realm. Let Chernatun belong to me again, as it did before your empire came. Do this, and the 7th death will be the last. Refuse, and I will drown this valley until water covers everything you've built." Then it was gone, sinking into 3 feet of water that should not have concealed anything, leaving only ripples that spread to the shore. April 30th, 1905, I reported my encounter to the company directors. They thought I'd had a breakdown, ordered me to take medical leave, but Dr. Bartosz supported my account. He'd examined 6 bodies that had drowned in places where drowning was impossible. Something was happening that science couldn't explain. The debate became irrelevant on April 30th when the 7th man died, the foreman of the pumping crew, a man named Josef Kral, who'd been operating the equipment that drained Chernatun, walked into the mine's lowest gallery at dawn. No one ordered him to. He simply went, descended to level 5, walked to the deepest point, and waited. We found him at shift change, lying in the center of Gallery 12, 120 meters underground. The tunnel was completely dry, but Joseph was soaked, drowned, and with water pooling around him and that green sediment under his nails. Beside him, carved into the coal face with something sharp, were Czech words in an archaic style. The balance is paid. Keep your word. May 5th, 1905. I convinced the company directors through a combination of pleading, evidence, and the simple fact that no worker would enter the mine anymore. The lower galleries, levels 4 and 5, were permanently sealed. The drainage channels to Chernatun were demolished. The pond was allowed to refill completely. By May 10th, Chernatun had returned to its original size and depth, a black circle of water on the hillside above the mine. We posted warnings: no swimming, no fishing, no interference with the pond. The deaths stopped. No more drownings, no more bodies found soaked in dry places. The mine continued operations in the upper galleries, but productivity was reduced and profits suffered. The company eventually sold the operation to a local concern that understood the boundaries, that respected Chernatun as sacred water. June 3rd, 1905, final entry. I resigned my position with the Karlstein Coal Mining Company. The Habsburg Mining Commission accepted my technical report, but removed all references to the Vodník, attributing the deaths to unknown geological phenomena, possibly gas-related. 7 men died. 7 men drowned in places where water had no right to exist. 7 men paid the price for my arrogance in believing that engineering could overcome territory claimed by something older than maps or mining rights. I work now as a consultant, teaching mining safety at the Technical University. See, I tell my students about gas detection, proper ventilation, timber support calculations, all the rational knowledge that keeps miners safe. But I also tell them about Chernatun. I tell them about boundaries that aren't on surveyor maps. I tell them that some water belongs to something that was here before us and will be here after us. Most dismiss it as folklore. A few listen with that particular attention that suggests they've encountered something similar in their own work, in their own valleys and mountains. Personal note: 1933. I am 69 years old. The Austrian Empire has fallen, Czechoslovakia has emerged, and much has changed. But Chernatun remains. I visit sometimes, standing at the water's edge, remembering. The pond is dark and still, surrounded now by warning signs in Czech that tell people to stay back, how to respect the water. Every few years someone ignores the warnings. A swimmer who thinks folklore is just superstition. A developer who wants to drain the pond for construction. An engineer who believes science can overcome everything. They drown, not always immediately, not always dramatically, but they drown. Sometimes in the pond itself, sometimes in places where water shouldn't be. And always the number is precise. Balance paid for balance taken. I've tried to warn people. published articles about respecting local water rights, about understanding that not all resources can be extracted without consequence. But greed and confidence are stronger than caution. The Vodník remains patient. He has time, he has his water, and he collects what is owed, one soul at a time, maintaining the balance that existed before we came and will exist long after we are gone. 7 men died because I drained his pond. 7 men whose deaths taught me that the world contains more than engineering can explain, that some boundaries aren't legal or physical, but older and more absolute. I carry their names with me: Jiří Kovář, František Dvořák, Martin Suck, Petr Novotný, and 3 others whose families asked me not to record publicly. 7 men who paid for my education, for my understanding that progress has limits, that some waters belong to forces we cannot negotiate with, only respect. The pond is still there, dark, still, ancient, and in its depths something waits that remembers every drowning, that claims every soul that touches water that belongs to it. I will not drain another pond. I will not redirect another sacred stream. I learned my lesson in the worst possible way. I just hope others learn it without the same cost. But every year I read reports of drownings in unlikely places, of water appearing where it shouldn't, of deaths that make no sense to modern investigation. And I know the Vodník still maintains his boundaries, still collects what is owed, still drowns those who forget that some territories were claimed long before humans built mines and empires and industries. The water remembers, the Vodník remembers, and in Bohemia's hills and valleys, in the dark ponds and ancient streams, the balance is always maintained. 7 for 7, payment for theft, the old laws that never changed.